Georgia, is that the prejudice is like anything else that people grow up with. They are not, if they are not encouraged to have an open mind, to accept everyone, they mouth the words, but they don't live it. And I believe that that's the biggest problem, because the groups will stick together here and stick together there, but reaching out, as I've had an opportunity to do in several places around the world, is absolutely critical. Doesn't make any difference what religion you are, what books you read. If you don't demonstrate what you believe deeply, then it's not helpful. And one of the reasons that I have been gravitated to the Baha'i faith is that I was exposed to it when I was first living in Hawaii, and then I traveled all around and met a lot of people who truly represented what the Baha'i faith stands for, and that's what attracted me to it. And it was unity, unity. We're trying to Yoda says you don't try, you just do. So you have to really believe that this is the right thing and be willing to work towards it and demonstrate it.
Thank you for sharing, Victoria. So the first thing I would like to do real quick is to ask if, and I just want to, this is kind of the norm, and I always want to make sure that everybody is able to speak, but always friends of color, if anybody wants to speak, please raise your hand, because I think this is an important comment to discuss. So one thing, Victoria, and I appreciate your comments, one thing that Shoghi Effendi really talks about in the writings is this idea that nobody can be exempt from the effects and the poisonous and racial structure that are of the society that we live in, because it's ingrained in all the fibers and structures of our society. And so even though, being born and raised in Gabon, West Africa, as a pioneer child, I have to also come face to face with the racism and the prejudices that I have, regardless of, who were my friends and the communities that I was in, because of the way it's ingrained in our communities and the way that we live in our culture. And so thinking about even how this happens on a day-to-day level, and how we cannot be exempt from this idea, and Shoghi Effendi talks about that as well. And so thinking about what that means in our day-to-day life. And so coming back to the question, if anybody else wants to respond, you can raise your hand. I'll see your blue hand to Victoria's comment. Yes, Sherry.
I've been a Baha'i 55 years. I saw the community within Houston, Texas, go from probably 3 African Americans and a total of 15 Baha'is, and not all of them were active. It's very interesting becoming a Baha'i in 1964, where we were still subject to Jim Crow segregation within the South. And all of a sudden, I ran into this group of people, and the first thing I remember, my teacher was a white male that said we believe in the oneness of humanity. And I remember saying all religions are teaching that, however, you don't see it anywhere. I said, so I'll tell you what, you can tell me 1,000 things, but unless you show me one, you might as well forget it. That was my introduction into the Baha'i community. And what is very interesting, to be able to go into the homes of white people during the time in 1964 is very, very, very interesting. It was an interesting dynamic for me to go in as a guest rather than going in to clean the house up or take care of the kids. So I wanted to know how many of those white people would come to an all-Black neighborhood in 1964, and I invited them to my house, and needless to say, I didn't have enough room for all those people that came. So what I would like to add to that is, when I said to him, all religions teach the oneness of humanity, but you hear it everywhere, but you don't see it nowhere. So that's one of the reasons that I became a Baha'i, is because of that oneness of humankind. But what is very interesting, you could have that attraction to the faith, because I came out of churches that preached it and you didn't see it anywhere. I know in some of the churches in the South, Black people had to demonstrate to get into those churches. The other thing too, because of we fear each other because we don't know each other, and we hate each other because we don't know each other, because we've been separated from each other. It's very interesting to throw people into a whole soup, into a whole pot. They don't know each other. You don't even know my experience. And so when I try to tell them to you, and you dismiss me, discount me, or make me think I'm crazy for even thinking that. So I go back to Sadie. Here's Sadie saying to Sugar Fendi, I'm only one little person. Nobody's going to listen to me. And that is a very interesting dynamic in this country. A white person can say something and everybody go, amen, that's the truth. A Black person say something and it's easily dismissed, or we don't know what we're talking about. So this was a very important crusade that Shoghi Effendi set Sadie Oglesby on. And the question is to her, how many people at the time the language was colored is in the Baha'i community? And it wasn't that many. And even in being in the faith almost 55 years, it's still not that many. And even when we enter, it's a revolving door. We go right back out again. There is something critical wrong within Baha'i communities, even though we have the plan that's right for the day. And when you try to speak about it, a lot of people run you away out of the Baha'i community when you talk about it. The other thing too, just one last thing. It's very interesting to me how the writing says racism, the most vital and challenging issue. And I have run into Baha'is for all of these years, afraid to even use that word racism. If you can't name it, you can't do nothing about it. We are not suffering from race unity. But yet and still, we are too scared to use the word what the writing said, racism, the most vital and challenging issue.
Thank you, Sherry, for sharing. And I think this gets us started on this question. So what behaviors or attitudes keep the Black man out? What are some experiences that you've had in your communities? And I'm trying to get at this because I think that if we don't talk about it, then we're not going to be able to notice them in our own communities. And so this is really important. I want to focus on this question. Diane, I saw your hand up. Diane Snow?
Yeah, thank you. That's a hard act to follow there, Sherry. Thank you so much for dropping all those gems of wisdom on us. I wrote several things down as you were talking, and I appreciate you spelling it out for us in that way. I also wanted to add one thing that The Guardian talks about, which is an air of conventionality. And I've thought about that for many years. You know, what does that mean? But I've recently come to understand that white people, myself included, have a very kind of cold and distant way about us. We're very self-contained and we treat other people like that, from different nationalities, different backgrounds, different races. We just treat everybody like that. And I think that it puts many people off, many people who come from warmer cultures where there's more of an embrace, there's more love, you know, people are kinder to each other. And so I think, you know, white people really need to think about that, and we need to adjust our behaviors and not be so distant and cold with everyone that we meet.
Thank you, Diane. That's helpful. So this idea of warmth, right? Thinking about what does warmth look like? What does extending friendship and warmth look like and welcome in our communities?
Lisa, I want to raise my hand and I'm having problems finding the hand to raise.
I got you. Yeah, please go ahead.
Okay. Well, I have a number of examples, and I was just sharing some with somebody yesterday. Again, this thing about, of course, just superiority, or that my culture is better and you need to come my way. And I gave an example of sometimes in the African American community, we might have like a chicken drumstick, eating it, and we're walking around talking with our drumstick in our hand, eating it. And I saw a person, an African American, doing that. We were at a fireside, and one of the people went and took the chicken out of her hand and gave her a plate. And that's just one example of, this is the way that you're supposed to do it. You must have your chicken in the plate. You just can't walk around and talk with a drumstick in your hand. And that happens in our community when we're together.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And may I add, I don't know if you would agree with this or not, but this is a very mild form of policing, right? The ways in which we look and apply our gaze or our perspectives. It's in a way we're policing Black people's behavior even in group settings or community settings.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if you would agree with that or not. But.
Okay, yeah. And I want to give you another one too. That kind of happened recently. Is that sometimes when the white friends come to your house, it's really strange how they're looking around your house. And I think I have observed them in other settings, and they're not looking around. It's their white counterparts. They're not looking around their homes. But they'll come in any opportunity to open up your refrigerator or to open up your pantry. And, we don't do that. Black people don't do that. And I don't believe white people go to other whites' homes and do things like that. But I've seen it more than once it happen in Black homes that the white people do that.
Mm. So can we talk a little bit about that? Do you mind if we just dig in why that is an issue? Why is that an issue? Why is it that this type of behavior, what even, and not even just what is the issue, but what is it that pushes white people to think, one, that they can do that, and why are they doing it? I don't know if.
I don't know. It's like your personal property. Mm-hmm. It's the same thing as, touching your hair, a feeling that I have the right to touch your hair. Your hair looks different, and I own you. I can touch this hair if I so want to touch this hair. So I think, to me, and other people have different thoughts, but again, it's like, I own you, and everything that you are is mine. But I think it's probably subconscious, but it's ingrained. It's just a part of the being and the way people have been socialized in this country.
Mm-hmm.
It does go back.
Maliwe had her hand up.
Yes, I do. And I want to say that I support what the previous speaker has said, because I feel like patronizing is very common amongst the other race. They have a good or a mild way of showing you or telling you that I am better than you are in many ways, which is true because they are so privileged as compared to what I am. And as subtle as the patronizing attitude is, we feel it, we see it, but it's hard for us to point it out or to say it because it's not loud. So I feel like that patronizing attitude needs to be addressed.
Thank you for sharing that, Maliwe. I see Sherry has her hand up.
In one of the magazines that was published by the National Spiritual Assembly, I'll never forget this. Until the cultural diversity of all of its people can be respected, until the cultural diversity of all of its people. As I said, I've been in the Pi community over 50 years, so I've seen a lot. And when you look at the cultural expression of music, I remember when the very first recording of the gospel, Baha'i gospel music came out. I've never in my life, and I've never since listened to any recording for 3 hours and cried because it was a long time coming. As if our music, the way our expressions was not valued. And in fact, I'm going to tell a story of something that happened in Houston. We had a celebration, let's say it was Nowruz, and there's all these different forms of music. And toward the end, one of the African-American women brought some music and she wanted shared. And they said they didn't have time for that. The other thing too is that we are asked repeatedly to reform, give up who you are and become the whole. The classism within the Baha'i community is strong. And I've seen it and I've heard it said by even Iranian Baha'is. They have one of them that lived with me in an all-Black neighborhood for 3 months. She said I would invite the friends to come over and just visit with her while I'm at work. And she flat told me they're not gonna come. And one of the reasons they won't come is because I am of a lower economic thing than these others. And so you have that classism within the Baha'i community. So where does that leave me if I'm working as a maid and all these other people are educated? So I think, see, these are very concrete things that I've witnessed. But one of the things that I've said, the reason that I've been able to endure all of it, because I believed when I declared at the age of 24 years old, I believed in this faith. And as I said, y'all can act as crazy as y'all want to. I ain't going nowhere.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing that. Charles, I see your hand up.
I just had a couple of thoughts. Like in trying to bring about change, like if we're members of the Baha'i community, and I don't know if everyone here is a member of the Baha'i community or not, I'm not quite sure. So I'm trying to make the comments inclusive, so whether you're Baha'i or not, I think one place to start is that to just say, yes, there's a problem between Blacks and whites. I mean, just say there's a problem with Blacks and whites in this country. We don't have to say that I'm the problem, that I created it. I mean, whatever it is that makes one feel crippled, then don't do it. Because if you're crippled, you can't change yourself or try to help bring about change. But just say, okay, there is a problem. Why do I know? Well, if in the Baha'i faith, it says so. And then if we're not Baha'is, if we look at the community, look at the country, we'll say, well, yes, there's a problem. Okay, so we start there. Then when I'm in the presence of someone who's of another race, then be conscious of that. Like the examples that were just given, it's a matter of consciousness, and then it's a different level to go to realizing that I'm being patronizing, that I'm doing something that I should not do when I go into a Black person's house. Because unless I can understand those things, I can't change it. For instance, like if I have to compare it, okay, if I'm white, if I have a good white friend, when I'm going to that person's house, how does it make me feel? Am I excited about it? Or when I get ready to go to a Black person's house, do I feel like, oh, I have to be on my P's and Q's? When I get in there, can I ask them things that may seem crazy? How would they feel about me if I do that? I mean, all of these things are part of, I think, fixing the solution. And it's okay. It's okay. The only thing that's going to work is if I genuinely, just like this sister said a few minutes ago, if I've decided that I'm going to work on myself to be better tomorrow than I am today, then I'm going to do the work. You know, I'm going to be crazy. I'm going to go into the house. And then as Black people, also, you know, we are very accommodating. We need to say, why are you going to my refrigerator? Why don't you just, look, do you do this when you go to somebody else's house? I mean, I know, and we do that to each other. Black people check each other all the time. We check each other, you know. We can do that if we think that, well, this person is trying, or this person I really want to love because I don't have any choice. I have to love you, whether you do the right thing or not. That's not your decision, it's not mine. God gave me that. He said, you have to love this person. But it doesn't mean you have to step all over me, because I'm going to tell you when you're stepping on something that you shouldn't be doing. And I'm going to tell you, even though you may not want to hear it, or maybe you think I'm being too harsh, or, you know, you're the angry Black person, or, you know, you're going to give me some tea. I have, you know, all that kind of stuff. It doesn't matter. What is the standard is the standard. I mean, what is the standard? That's the standard. So I have to recognize where I am on that standard and then deal with it. You know, like there have been a lot of mention about the Baha'i community. For instance, like in the Baha'i community, very often for many, many years, people of color, Black people have just been silent. We just walk away. Okay, it's too much for them. We just don't say anything, let them just go ahead. And I think that trend is changing, you know, and why is it changing? It has nothing to do with the Baha'is, because Baha'u'llah gave it to us. He tells us who is equal, who has right to say, who is not. It doesn't come from the Baha'is. And the Baha'is are all striving. It's all striving. So I'm just saying, I think we have to just examine each action. And then because of our love for God, then I will examine it. And maybe I can examine it in a way that you will want to hear it, or maybe you will not. But whether you understand it or not, I'm going to do this because I want to do the will of God. And the will of God says we have to live in a community as one people. And so that's going to have all these different kind of phases. So I just think we have to be more audacious in trying to bring about changes. You know, we can't be silent. We have to just go and know that we're just, and then we'll pray, okay, hopefully this is the best way, but sometimes we'll make mistakes. It's okay. It's all right. Next time we'll do it better.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And I just want to piggyback. Thank you, Charles, for these comments. They're so important. And one thing that I want to piggyback on was the last thing that he said about it. We are going to make mistakes, and to think that we're going to walk through our racism and to walk through all the ways in which we've been taught to feel superior because of the culture and everything else that we've been in, that we are every day going to make mistakes. And I think this is where thinking about virtues and actions, like Charles is talking about, thinking about what does courage look like? What does humility look like when we're working towards race unity? What does it mean to stand up every day, you know, and try again, even if you know that you've messed up? What does it look like to know that it's going to be isolating, you know, that you're not going to get accolades, not to expect accolades when you're doing race unity type of work. Nobody owes you anything. You're doing it because the Guardian, Baha'u'llah, Shoghi Effendi, Guardian Shoghi Effendi, Abdul Baha, everybody is saying this is what we need to do. We don't deserve accolades. We're asked to establish the oneness of humanity. And what does that look like? And it looks like a lot of trial and error, a lot of pain, because we're undoing a lot of things that we've been taught in ourselves a little by little. And the only way we can progress is by actually trying and working through it. If everyone is okay, I'd like to move on to the second question. Would that be okay with everyone? Okay. So the second question, and I'm going to post it in the chat as well. Does everybody see it? It says, what does "for the sake of the world" mean? So the last sentence was, whatever it is, you must remove the thing that keeps the Black man out and bring him into the cause. Not for the sake of the colored group, but for the sake of the world and for the sake of establishing the kingdom of God on earth. And so the second question asks, and I don't know if you can see it well, sorry. What does "for the sake of the world" mean? How can an influx of Black Baha'is in the faith in the US, who are truly valued and welcomed, impact the nation and the world? And I will go ahead and post this question also in the chat, and I'll stop sharing. So please, I want us to focus on this question specifically, because I think as white people specifically, if you're going to talk, I just want to say that inherently in our nature, we want to go back and say things because we want to defend whether or not we're racist or the things that we're hearing and how we're saying it. So I'm asking everybody to really focus on what the question is asking and not necessarily to deter and go to personal stories like, you know, I think you know what I'm talking about. So who would like to go next? I see Victoria's hand is up.
Right. I just have a comment. I'm fascinated by the conversation, and I have to admit that with my background, I'm French and Italian, and I don't have that that prejudice, and so I have a difficult time because I've got friends of all races, and I walk with them and communicate with them. We don't openly necessarily discuss this question about what people can do. My feeling is, and people ask me often, so how do you do this or how do you do that? And I say, if you want to know what I believe, then watch how I live my life. And so my feeling about all of this is that, you know, it's important to openly demonstrate what you believe. You know, for example, the thing about, you know, going into somebody's refrigerator. Somebody went into my refrigerator, man, I'd tell them, you know, what for, because that's just rude in any society. And there again, I go back to demonstrating. I've got Black friends and I go wherever, you know, I've been to all Black churches. And this is the, in my feeling, this is the way to show people you don't have to say anything. You don't have to be, you know, out there and affront to anyone. Just demonstrate your beliefs.
Victoria, I would love to get into that conversation about whether or not we actually have prejudices or things like that. But I think this conversation is really focused on the question, and I would love to talk about it on the side if we could get together, if you could put your email in the chat, because I don't want to deter it and talk about whether or not we have prejudices, because the faith is clear and the writings are clear that we're all struggling with the fact that we have these inherent prejudices. And so I don't want to take the conversation there because it's not fair for everybody who's in the space right now. And so if you don't mind, if you can just chat me your email and we can have that conversation later on the side. But what I would really like to focus on right now, and I see that Catherine Davis's hand was up. Somebody told me Catherine Davis's hand was up.
Yeah. Okay, should I go? Okay, that phrase, for the sake of the world, I think it means that if you leave out all the Black people, think of a bird. If both of those wings are not, if they don't have both wings, they can't fly. If you leave out a group of people and we're going, trying to get towards unity, there will be no unity if you leave the Black people out. And I think that's what he's saying, that they have to come in because they have a, Blacks have a part to play in getting this unity together. And if you leave them out, there will be no unity because you left out a whole segment of people and the bird can't fly.
Thank you. Charles, I see your hand up.
I just wondered if also in line, even going even like a even deeper, for the sake of the world, like one question that comes to my mind is, what do Black people bring to the Baha'i faith? Why would they be singled out to say, bring them here for the sake of the world? Why? And to figure out what that is, because if we can figure that out, then it would put the importance of bringing Blacks into the faith at a different scale. If it's for the sake of the world, and if they're not in the faith, then what is it that they're bringing? If that's going to help me to put it at a whole different level of attraction.
Mm. Could you maybe dig a little bit deeper and give us some examples of what that would be like in our day-to-day life? I don't know. I don't want to put you on the spot, but I would be helpful for us to think about what does that actually look like?
Well, I was thinking about, again, it's about definition. For instance, like if I were to talk about what Blacks would bring into the faith, then I have things that I could say that are unique. There's parts of culture and history, suffering, all those qualities that are unique. But I think it's even more important, like if we're part of the Baha'i community, to look at what the Baha'i community, what it says in our writings, Blacks bring to the faith. Mm-hmm. What those qualities are that are unique and they bring to the faith. So I think that's what we should dig into. We should dig into what those qualities are. And if those qualities are in Black people, and it says for the sake of the world, and the Black people are not in the community, then there you go.
Mm-hmm. So let's follow up on this question that Charles is asking us. So what qualities are there? You can either type them in the chat or share them. What are some of the qualities that Black people bring to our communities? Diane, I see your hand up.
Yeah, thank you, Charles. That was great. I would suggest that Black people have a very highly developed sense of consciousness and justice that they bring into the faith. Very highly developed, and we desperately need that.
Thank you. There's also, I see in the chat, music, nobility, warmth, a deep spiritual connection with the Creator, insight. So can we talk a little bit more about insight? Because I think this would be helpful in digging in. Well, how is insight important for us in our communities? Is it, hello?
Pupil of the eye.
Pupil of the eye. Is this, who's talking? Sorry, I don't hear you very loudly.
That's May. It's they're pupil of the eye.
Oh, May Benjamin. Oh, hi. Pupil of the eye. Okay.
I mean, we have a perfect example. I'm sorry, Liz, I can't find the little hand thing.
That's fine.
We have a perfect example in Cherry. She just gave us a lot of insight into what her experience was like being in the Baha'i community when she first became a Baha'i, and how she struggles even today and has to put the armor on that I am here in this faith, and no matter what you say, I'm a Baha'i and I'm staying here. So she is giving us the insight about what it's like to be Black or African American in a primarily white community.
Mhm.
And we need to hear that as white people.
Mhm. Mhm. Yes, Sherry?
I want first to defer to Hal because he's been trying, had his head up for the longest time and it's
Oh.
not been acknowledged. Hal,
You?
would you?
I don't see you, Hal. I'm sorry.
Yeah. Okay. I just wanted to comment that if the writings say that Black people are the pupil of the eye, as someone has already mentioned, then we're never going to see the truth as humanity, and we're never going to see our true way to reach our destiny of unity in the world if we don't recognize that Black people are the pupil of the eye, and we need that pupil of the eye to see where we're going, see reality, because that shows us our path in life. That's all I wanted to say. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And I apologize, I didn't see your hand earlier. Jackie, I see your hand in a minute and I'll call on you after Sherry, but I just wanted to piggyback a little bit on what Hal just said about this idea of not being always able to see. And I don't know the exact quote, but I know James Baldwin and a couple others have talked about, and I believe even Bell Hooks has talked about how Black people know white people better than white people know themselves. And you know, and so thinking about this idea of insight, because of the way the hierarchy is structured, right? I know that I would learn the most about myself from Black women, right? Thinking about the intersectionality of race and gender, and thinking about where we are and what kind of benefits and privileges we have, that it's hard for us to even see and perceive it. And so part of this insight for me to be able to learn more about myself is really connecting with the pupil of the eye so that I can learn from them better about who I am so that I can grow. And so I just wanted to add that. Sherry?
I'm very happy that you said that because it's something that I say all the time. And first of all, let me say, I'm not an angry Black woman. I'm a powerful Black woman, and there is a difference. And that's how I carry myself as this powerful Black woman. And in doing so, I've said this repeatedly. You see, our survival in this country depended on us knowing white people. Because up until the 50s or 60s, over half of all Black women were working in the homes of white people, taking care of their children, cleaning their houses. You would have to be mighty stupid not to recognize what is happening in that home, how they're even treating you. We even know and say this is going to be crude, but I want to bring the point home. See, I'm not here to look good. I'm here to look real. We even know when the women have sex because we have to wash the sheets. We know white people, but you see, the sadness is white people don't know us. And what they do know of us, for most of them, is what they saw in the movies, what they read in a book. And when you talk about how we are set up, how these things are structured, there was a study that was done in the 50s by Dr. Nicholas, and he said for white people, the greatest, now this is not my study and I'm not a doctor and all that other stuff, but he said the greatest and highest value for white people is in the object, whatever that object is. For people of color, the greatest object is the relationships. So the bottom line is we know how to have relationships, because for us, it's the only thing that have sustained us all of these years, you know, living in communities, to have the insight enough to know that I can depend on every Black woman in that community to take care of my children. And they can chastise my children too when they are going awry, when they're not acting and behaving correctly, because that is community. And to be able to say, oh, gee whiz, you know, oh, you out there, you know, raising a garden? Well, shucks, I may go over and help you, you know, hold the fields and everything. But there is something in that study. It's a very important study, that our greatest value is relationships. And that insight, to tap into that insight and how we talk to each other. A lot of us, it's not so much with the younger people, but we connected each other to family in some kind of way. We always call each other sister or brother, or used to be cousin. Everybody was cousin, because we have that of connecting, that insight of really connecting to other people. And so, and then to go back to say one last thing that is my pet peeve. In the writings, it used the words Negro. Now, you know you ain't running out not calling nobody a Negro, because you'd probably get your head chopped off by some Black person. But so if we can use words to update, words that changes all the time. I feel my pet peeve is, I know what the rights and writing say and refers to us as different races. I get that. But you know, one of the things that I have to say with all sincerity, the more we call each other different races will make it harder for us to achieve this oneness that we talk about all the time. And as far as I'm concerned, when you call each other different races, you are using the tools of the master that created races in the first place. I will never, ever refer to not anyone in here on this planet as different races. And if there isn't a word in the dictionary that adequately express who we are as one human family, all Homo sapiens sapiens with at least 99 part DNA in common, make up a word. I sleep with a white man every night for 38 years, white, blonde, and blue-eyed. And if anybody ever asked me, even the Baha'is asked me to do a talk on interracial marriages, I said, I'll never do any talk at all under that title. I'll do a talk on the living with a man, married to a man of different hues, different ethnicities, different anything, but I'll never cross that line and say different races. You are using the language of the oppressor when you call people different races. Can we Baha'is today on this chat, let's try it out, roll it off your tongue and see how it feels. You can refer to all of us in any way you want to other than different races. People of different hues, different ethnic groups, and see even people that have parents of two different hues, from two different nationalities, two different ethnicities. I call them blended families. See, that's how I make up words all the time. So just try it and see what it feels like to not refer to us as different races. You can't have the oneness of humanity and we still be different races.
Thank you, Sherry. So let's take on this challenge. I know Jackie had her hand up, and then I see Ed has his hand up. Diane, were you clapping or did you have your hand up?
I was high-fiving Sherry.
Okay. So we have Jackie, and then we have Ed, and then we have Victoria.
Okay. Sherry's my spiritual mother, and we're the spiritual mothers of Lisa, who's on here too. So we have connections. But the thing is, Sherry and I were friends for 12 years. I became a Baha'i 12 years before we started talking about racism. And she and I had never talked about racism. We were best friends. We were sisters. So it's very common. You know, you may have friends and family of color never to discuss racism, but as we began to unpack our unaware racism, because we are so steeped in racism in this country. And I mean, Shoghi Effendi has said, you know, until we have Black people coming into the faith in troops, we cannot achieve world peace. It is dependent on us. That is why the world, that is our mission for the world. That's why it is so important. And there are so many obstacles because of unaware racism and microaggressions and things that white people say and do that are unaware and unconscious, but are hurtful to people of color. Until we start being, you know, looking inside of ourselves and finding and listening to the voices of Black people, to me, it's like they are the canary in the coal mine, because they are in the white culture, they're in their own culture. White people are not in the, we may have good friends, but we don't experience their culture. So we have to be open to, listen to, and find a way to understand what it is to be a person of color, to be a Black person, because they are not, unless they trust you, they're not going to tell you what it's like. But you have to have that trust for them to experience, to be able to tell you what it is like.
Thank you, Jackie. Victoria? We're not hearing you, sorry. How do I make my, Victoria, you're muted right now.
There I go. How do you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, real fine. First of all, I want to thank everybody for their comments, and I apologize because in one way, I can't identify with much of this only because I was not raised, nor did I let myself experience a great deal of prejudice, racial prejudice. And I went to school in South Georgia in the 1960s. So you know what that means. I feel that the main thing that all of us need to do about this issue is to simply demonstrate our beliefs. That's hard to do, you know, sometimes, but demonstrate the love and the caring and the, you know, so, because my feeling is like, what's the difference? And I recognize that I've been privileged to live in primarily Black countries. And it just, the way those people accepted me was not, oh, you know, she's a tourist and she has money and this and that, because that wasn't the case, of course. I was there and I was teaching and whatever. But to just in your heart accept everybody. That's what I really work at doing, unless someone is overtly negative, hurtful to someone else. And usually I'll jump in there like Cherry was talking about, and I'll tell them what for, you know, this is not acceptable. And anyway, so that's it. My bottom line is demonstrate what you believe.
Thank you for sharing that, Victoria.
Ed had his hand up.
Ed, yes, thank you. Ed, sorry I forgot you. I jumped
That's
you.
okay.
I apologize.
I mean, first of all, I mean, the first thing I want to say, and this is really important, is I mean, I'm really loving this conversation today. Everybody's saying so many insightful and varied things. I mean, we're all more, on the most part, I think, on the same page. But I love what Cherry's been saying, and Diane and Victoria and many other people. The interesting thing is, but the one thing that Cherry said, just I think in her last comments, is kind of interesting, is how she doesn't really see, or she was saying how she thinks of us all as being one race. You know, she doesn't think of her. I think the point you were trying to make, there's, you've been with, you said, a blue-eyed white man for like 38 years, and so you don't really, in that sense, you're not thinking of race, and you wouldn't speak on interracial marriages. And I think that's kind of like a catch-22 we have with this issue, because we need to talk about it. I mean, that's why we're here today. We need to talk about issues of race. And I think, Liz, you remember, I think Ian in our racial task force even said the same thing on our last meeting, but it's kind of implying that but we can't talk about it all the time. There's other things we need to talk about too. And so it's this weird thing where we need to talk about it a lot. We need to analyze it, But then at the same time, we don't want to be, that's not the only thing we want to think about, right? Because there's so many different issues. And I don't remember who it was, but somebody mentioned the classism thing. And I think that's a thing that has to be thought about a lot, because people, whether even outside of race, there's, people look down on people who don't make a certain amount of money. And so there's so many different kinds of prejudices. I know we're focusing mainly on race, but we do talk about the, gender issues sometimes as well. And so it's so important that so weird. It's like it really is a catch-22, because we really got to think about these issues. We really need to discuss them, but at the same time, we still have to think of each other as human beings. And I agree in theory with what Diane said about white people compared to Black people being cold and distant sometimes and not real engaged. I actually do think that way, Diane. But then I take a step back and I think about, and of course there's 7.2 billion people in the world, maybe even more than that now. But I can think of a lot of white people that are, quite frankly, great, and then are not like that, like Liz Allen, Jeff Kugler. I can name Brett Shaw. I can sit there naming, white Baha'is, white people that aren't Baha'is that are really great people. So but then one other thing I want to say before I stop talking is, Liz, you just mentioned about how you kind of see yourself through the eyes of Black women. Well, I know I'm a white guy, but I'm a teacher, and most of the people that have impacted me the most have been older Black women, that have been my mentors. So I know that's not the typical life of a white man. That's not your average white man experience, but we all have different experiences. The person that impacted me the most in my school in Pittsburgh was an African American woman who was my principal. I wouldn't have made it through the first 3 years of teaching if it wasn't for my African American woman principal at my school in Durham, called Aaron Harris, which I worked with at Ann Bauer, and she knows who I'm referring to. And I have a lot of other mentors that are African American women. So I know it's kind of a little bit all over the place there, but I just wanted to say how much I appreciated everybody's comments, but just how it is a tricky issue, because on one hand, we really, really need to talk about it, but at the same time, if we're going to really be united, we can't over categorize, I guess is what I'm going to say. Okay. And that's where I'll stop talking.
Thank you, Ed. I appreciate it. I'd like to move on to the next slide, and then we're going to end hard stop at 12:30. The one thing that I just want to piggyback with on what Ed said was that even though there are all of these issues, the Guardian is very clear that if the race issue is not addressed, and I know that's not what you're trying to say, but if the race issue is not addressed, then oneness and unity is never going to be achieved. And so even though there are other issues such as classism or things like that, being willing to focus on the issue of racism because it's the most vital issue, and all of the others will hopefully sort itself out as we address the issue of racism. So I just wanted to recenter racism again in this conversation. So here's the next slide. And I don't know if Diane, I don't know who read last. Sorry, I forget. I don't know if it's my turn or Maliwe or Diane's turn.
I think it's my turn. I'll just read.
Okay, thank you.
Shogi Effendi, I said, it appears to me, and has for some years, that these two groups, the white and the Black races, are the outer ends of the great circle that is coming together. And if we could join these two groups, all the other groups would come in. He said, just so you have analyzed it perfectly. When these two groups join hands, the circle is rounded and everything will adjust itself. He said, I want to see many colored people come into Haifa. And he said, the blacker they are, the better we will be pleased.
Is it my turn or Maliwe's? I forgot the order, I'm sorry. Maliwe, do you want to read?
Okay, I can do that. He said, no doubt the white people of America are watching to see what the Baha'is are doing with the colored people. And when they see the white Baha'is accepting the colored people as brothers, in every sense of the word, it will give them confidence in your religion. end. They will join with you, helping to establish universal brotherhood. But as long as we don't absolutely practice this, we are keeping the white Baha'is out of the cause.
Oh, there's my answer.
I'll read the question.
Okay.
What would white Baha'is accepting the colored people as brothers in every sense of the word look like today in our personal and community life? What would you do for your brother? What are some ways you would nurture, encourage, and safeguard, which are the words of the guardian in the advent of divine justice? So what are some ways that you would nurture, encourage, and safeguard your brother in your community, knowing the current realities we live in? I'll also paste it in the chat in a moment.
Liz,
Yes.
on this quote here, okay, I'm trying to, the last sentence says, but as long, no, let's go up a little further. All right, let's do the whole thing.
Go ahead.
Okay, no doubt, the white people of America are watching to see what the Baha'is are doing with the colored people. And when they see white Baha'is accepting the colored people as brothers in every sense of the word, it will give them confidence in your religion, and they will join with you, helping to establish universal brotherhood. But as long as we don't absolutely practice this, we are keeping the white Baha'is out of the cause. Okay, I'm trying to wrap around this, the last part, keeping the white Baha'is out of the cause. If okay.
I hope there's no typo. I don't think there is.
I think
It sounds like it should be whites out of the cause.
I think it, okay, I think I got it in my head. If white people are noticing that the whites are not accepting the blacks, and in every word, sense of the word, then the whites won't come, because they are noticing that the white Baha'is are not accepting the color. Is that what it means?
What does everybody else think? I know Chuck has his hand up.
Okay.
Let's discuss this a little bit before we get to the question. And I'll leave the screen up so everybody can see it. Go ahead, Chuck.
I was thinking about that exact same question this morning as I was reading before we got together. And a thought that comes to me is that the effect of white supremacy on whites is this fear of Black people, in the sense that because of what whites have done to Blacks over the centuries, we fear that if there's unity or equality, then Black people will do that to us. And so I think seeing Black and white people together, this is just the best way I can try to begin to understand what he's saying here, is that seeing Black and white people together will help other people, other whites, quell that fear that they don't think it's ever possible to happen without there being kind of a retaliation against whites. That's just a real crude interpretation that I'm thinking.
Mm-hmm. Thank you for sharing that. Any other thoughts? Because I have my screen up, I'm having a hard time seeing hands up. I see Sherry, and then Gary, and then Victoria. Oh, and I see Hal.
What I would say is, it's very interesting when you talk about people of European descent. People of European descent come from all countries. And many of the people of European descent came here poor with, I love when Tim Wise said, my grandfather came here with nothing but 30-some cents in his pocket and a ball of lint. But it didn't take him long to look around and see who's making it. And in this country, the people that was making it was white people. But you see, that's another phenomenon. you have to also, when you identify yourself with whiteness, he said you have to look at who they're dumping on. And you have to begin to dump on them too if you want to be accepted in the fold. So let's look at this sentence, keeping white Baha'i. Oh, see, I'm going to say keeping white people out of the cause. I'm going to take the Baha'i off of that sentence, keeping white people out of the cause. If white people are looking to other white people as to a way to be able to navigate life in the United States. Well, if they see all these white people in a religion with all these black people, that in itself sends a very powerful message, a very powerful statement. And in a lot of ways, it gives them the courage, I'll say the courage to take that step to really investigate that. But as long as they see other white people doing the opposite, you got this thing. It keeps going in the same circle, nothing happens.
Thank you. Okay, please remind me, I said Gary next, right?
Right, and this may be an oversimplification, but I think that you know, people, the whites included and all the races, are looking at what the Baha'i faith is actually doing. And if they see the white people not treating others, non-whites, with, you know, equality and justice, well, then we're hypocrites. Why would you want to join something that's hypocritical?
Thank you, Gary. So I see Charles, I'm gonna let Charles go first, and then we'll come back to Victoria and Hal.
I just wanted to mention one thing that we were talking about earlier about for the sake of the world. Like here, it's like giving the example of what will happen, what will attract whites to the Baha'i community, to the faith of God. But I just want to remember that the underlying thing in that is that it's not people who have been the cause of the suppression and all of these inequities that are leading this charge. It's not saying that white people are going to show in the Baha'i community how to do this. You know, it's like if, it's like a person who is inebriated, who's done all kinds of things and is trying to drive a car. Black people are not going to let the white person get behind the wheel and drive the car. The car should be driven by the blacks because they have the skills. I think I think we just have to kind of keep that in mind, that it's not saying that that's where the direction is coming from. Otherwise, why say bring them for the sake of the cause of God into the faith? That the direction, and that's also, and not to say that Black people are, the examples of Abdu'l-Baha, that we're walking around with pure eyes to see. But he's saying that the potential to do that and to give that direction is with Blacks, So even as we're studying and we're trying to understand, I just think we have to kind of keep that in mind, that the impact of that will not happen until Blacks are in the community, until they're actively doing those kinds of things that's been called for in the writings of the faith.
Thank you. I had Victoria and then Hal and then Jackie. Victoria, we don't hear you. I think you're muted.
Okay. Well, this discussion is extremely interesting. I have to say, when we talk about how we're going to do this with the rest of the world, I have to go back to demonstrating it. I'm living on my sailboat in a marina that has like 300 boats, and there all kinds of people come into the very tiny little laundry room. And recently there was a mixed race couple. I I just talked with them just like I would anybody else. If you have in your mind that there's a difference, it's going to show. If you have in your mind and in your heart that there's no difference, that should show too.
Thank you. Hal? And then Jackie.
Yes, I just wanted to say that as Baha'is, we have been told that we're supposed to live the life, to walk the walk, talk the talk, or walk the walk and not just talk the talk, I guess is what I want to say. And if we're going to be a unifier in the world, if we're going to unify the races, if we're going to get together, then white people have to recognize that we have to, like Charles is saying, we have to look at through the pupil of the eye and see where we're going. We can see the truth. If we bring every part of the body or the body of humanity together, and the pupil of the eye is a very important part of the humanity. We need to bring that in perspective and see that we're not going to see where we're going. We're not going to see how to create unity on the planet if we don't get that perspective. And I just wanted to bring that in. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Jackie?
You know, I've traveled quite a bit on Zoom since March. I've been to so many different communities and different courses, different webinars. And the one thing that I find in many, many of them is hearing the voices of Black people that haven't been heard before, but feel they're in a space where they can trust that what they say will be heard. And what I'm hearing is a great deal of pain that is unspoken in many of Baha'i communities by people of color, by Black people who do not feel that they're welcomed, that they're heard, that they're valued, that their ideas are incorporated into how decisions are made. And the Universal House of Justice, in one of their letters recently, said that we need to put the focus and lift the voices of African Americans in everything we do, every decision we make. So it's, unless you start listening to what the pain is like, it's palpable. And many believers have actually come into the faith, Black believers have come into the faith and left because they find this sense of hypocrisy and unconscious pain that is inflicted by people, by white people, by Persians, unwittingly. We don't mean it, but we don't know how it feels to them. And even many Black believers who've been in the faith for years feel that they sometimes feel that they want to move out of their communities as well, not leave the faith, but leave their communities because they feel in a lot of ways their voices aren't being heard, they're being put down, they aren't in the forefront of what is going on, and they're not valued. And if that's what's going on, as white people we're unaware of that, that is why Shoghi Effendi says it's the most vital and challenging issue within the Baha'i community, because we're unaware of our own prejudices and biases. We don't know them until we start looking at and listening to the voices of African Americans. We will not know them.
Thank you for sharing that, Jackie. And I do want to end at 12:30, so maybe I'll take one final comment. And I just want to focus once again, and it'll be Sherry. I just want to focus, I don't know, Sherry, if you can just maybe speak to this idea of what are some ways you would nurture, encourage, and safeguard Black Baha'is in our communities. Just to piggyback on what Jackie is saying is how do we hear the pain? How do we listen? And then how do we nurture, encourage, and safeguard Black Baha'is in our community? Oh, I don't hear you, Sherry. I think you're
In
muted.
1992, in the American Baha'i, which was a very small little thing, not sophisticated at all. But in that one of the letters, it even said that white Baha'is or Baha'is of Iranian descent should move into the neighborhoods of people of color to really be able to get to know them. In our writings, it's also said there is no room for discrimination. However, even in our voting, we can discriminate in favor of the people of color or the minority, whatever the minority look like. So in looking at that, those two things, when I joined this, before I joined the faith, I said, I went over to all of these white people houses. And then I wanted to know how many white people will come to an all Black neighborhood. And the Baha'is showed up in droves, okay? So I'll never forget that. But I think we should be, and a lot of times we do things and we invite Black people, people of color to come to our house. How often do you go to their house? And as Diane said, and when you get there to behave. I think there's another thing too, that what everybody should, because I cannot speak about what I don't know. And if you don't get to know the people that you're wanting to teach, how are you going to do a good job at that? And let me say to all of you that may not have done one racist act in your entire life, you cannot deny the fact that you benefit from your whiteness. You can't deny that. The other thing too, when we talk about this subject within the Baha'i, the framework of the Baha'i community, you know, I have a lot of pain and I don't have time to bleed all over the floor for y'all to get it, but I have a lot of pain that was caused by the Baha'i community, being a Baha'i at the age of 24 and I'm 79 now. I have a lot of history of pain. And I do know I can only show up at the Baha'i events when I have enough energy and courage to take the crap that I may have to face when I get there. So you want to make it better? You want to make it, truly make it better. I want you to pick any white person on this chat that is the same economic level of you and see how you treat them and how you behave with them. And if you could do that, then you behave the same way with people of color, regardless of who they are. And because there's a lot of things you would not do if you're on the same economic level, but you may look down on poor people, but of the same color. So it's and a lot of, to me, is common sense. To end, I will quote from Abdu'l-Baha. When Abdu'l-Baha united Louise and Louis Gregory in marriage, he said he hoped that this marriage would put so much love into the hearts of the believers until not only will they unite, but even intermarry. And I've seen too many Baha'i communities. White women is being dating and married and everything else, and the Black women just sitting around looking. And there's even an article in American Baha'i, in the World Faith about that. You know, we just sit around and look, even though it says that we should not only unite, but even intermarry. I've seen too many communities, Black women, Black men, they just on the side. We the standbys and the look at us. So I will end with all of that I'm glad and welcome to the party, but the Baha'i faith, even though we have the writings from the 20s, we are late in this game. It's been too many other religions that's far ahead of us in having these conversations. We late to the party, which means we have to work harder and faster to catch up. Thank you.
Thank you, Sherry. So we'll have two last comments. I'll call on Chuck and then Bob James will have the last word.
Thank you, Cherry. It's so good to hear your voice, and I always learn so many new things in hearing what you have to say. And I don't know if we're going to continue this study for the rest of the letter in months ahead or not, but I think I would really like to see that. But not knowing that, I wanted to jump to page 5 and answering this question where Sadie Oglesby talks about being off duty and being on duty. And I loved that passage where she said that the people that taught her the faith, if they were ever off duty, she would have walked away. And what she meant is, were they conscious? Were they being conscious about their whiteness and about her blackness and about the interaction between white and black people? So I think to nurture, encourage, and safeguard means for me as a white person is to never go off duty, is to always be on duty, and never let go of that, because that is one of the privileges of whiteness, is I can let go, I can go off duty, right? But I think to be firm in the covenant, I have to stay on duty. So thank you.
Thank you. And just to respond to Chuck's question, the third, we'll be studying this letter, continuing it on the third Sundays of every month. So those who got their emails or the announcements from someone else and are not on the listserv, either you can put your email in the chat so I can add you to the email thread if you want to join again, or just make sure you reach out to whoever gave you the link the third Sunday of every month. Bob?
Okay, I'll try to be brief. I know you wanted to end at 12:30, it's 12:30 now. But something I mentioned last week was an analogy that I usually give to whites particularly, that if you are a non-smoker and you go into a room that is full of smoke and then you come out of that room, you will have that stench of smoke. And people who come in contact with you will smell that smoke and will feel that you are a smoker. And the same thing is true with racism. This country was born of racism and is still very racist. And anyone who's grown up in this country will have some aspect of racism, but will not be aware that you have it. I had a close friend who had other, I had a close friend who was at a Baha'i meeting, and she was telling me how she saw an African-American, she was white, she saw an African-American Baha'i come into the room, and they talked some, but as the white Baha'is came in, she greeted them differently than she did the black Baha'i. And the black Baha'i eventually went over to her and said, and I'm just going to call her name, that's not her real name, but Susie, you're racist. And Susie was taken aback and was wondering, why did she say I'm racist? I grew up as a Baha'i, I'm not racist. I don't know where this is coming from. She was very hurt by that comment. But because they were close friends, they talked, and she was able to step back to hear what the black Baha'i had to say, and she accepted what she said, and was very appreciative that she was able to hear some of the things that she was unconscious about. And knowing that the Guardian says that whites need to abandon once and for all the usually inherent and at times subconscious sense of superiority, she was able to accept that she had a subconscious sense of superiority that she was not aware of. And I know there are times that I will tell a white Baha'i that I've been offended by certain things that have been said, only to get a pushback of, you're too sensitive, or that's not the way it is, or may apologize and then give a rationale for why they were reacting the way they were. And to me, making an excuse for why they did what they did. It is very frustrating for me to hear that and to experience that type of thing. Those white Baha'is who are willing to hear and to listen and to absorb and accept. And as some people have said, black Baha'is are the people of the eye. And we are able many times to see those discrepancies that occur. And if white Baha'is can be willing to take a step back and to hear what we're saying and to understand, when things are offensive or things of that nature. I think that can go a long ways in remedying it. And I'm like Sherry, I've been in the faith for 54 years. I ain't going anywhere, but I know, but I know that it is very frustrating for a lot of us to get that pushback from different lives. So anyway, thank you. Thank you, Liz. I really enjoyed this program.
Thank you, Bob, for the last words. So we're gonna end with a uplifting song, and if you all need to leave, feel free to leave while the song is playing. And I just want to say I'm just so grateful to be here and to always have this space, and also just to be so grateful to the Durham LSA for hosting this space. And you know, it's a courageous thing for them to really allow us to dig in and have these conversations. And so I always want to say thank you to them as well, for always having this space for us. So thank you for joining us, and and I see all the emails that you sent, so me in the chat, so I'll add all of you to the third Sunday from now on.
I want to thank Bendu to send me the link. So
Okay.
to her.
All right.
I'll be encouraged to
It was a great meeting. Great job, everybody. Good job, Liz.
Thank you. So let me go ahead and end with this song that Charles Bullock so kindly shared with me. Let's see. Does everybody see it? Is this it, Charles? Yeah. Okay. Sorry, I just need to close this window real quick. Okay, here we go. Sorry, that wasn't a very smooth ending. I apologize. All right, friends, thank you so much. I hope you have a wonderful rest of your Sunday. This was really lovely, and I'm so glad we could connect this morning. So,
Thank
bye.
you
Thank you
so much.
Thank you so much. If the video was recorded, I mean the session was recorded, and I wasn't planning necessarily on sharing it, but some friends are asking. So if you do not feel or are not comfortable with it being, so if you're okay with me sharing the recording, don't email me. However, if you are not comfortable with the idea of this video being shared, please please email me and let me know. And then based on that, depending on what kind of responses I get, I will not share it if anybody is not comfortable. But if you are comfortable, don't email me if you aren't or not. And I'll put my email in the chat. Please let me know. It's AllenElizabethM@gmail.com.
Thank you so much, everyone.
Thank you. Thank you. All right. Bye, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Aloha pa.
Aloha pa.